I knew over 20 males who have committed suicide and countless others who have at least contemplated it. Throughout my career, I've worked largely with adolescents, with young boys and young men. And the frequency that this conversation was happening and the act that it was happening at was alarming then. Since becoming a father and being a father to a 2-year-old little boy, and now being in different environments and hearing different conversations with parents, especially with their siblings as they go into early elementary school, you're hearing this conversation as early as that. And because I wasn't privy to these environments until I had my son, it was quite awakening to me. Last week, I had mentioned a book on our Instagram page, of Boys and Men, written by Richard Reeves, where he highlights the struggle that young boys and young men are going through as early as elementary school. And it's starting with academically and them falling behind. And as they fall behind academically, what that does to them socially, what that does to them mentally. And as these young boys are struggling through school, and if you look at the percentage and the lack of male teachers that are there, young boys not feeling comfortable to say that they're falling behind or to say that they're feeling inadequate to their peers. And Richard Reeves, the author of this book, had said this statement in here that I didn't really think that you would have to mention, but it's a conversation that is true. And he said that there's this feeling that if you care about your young boys, if you care about your sons, somehow you don't care about your daughters. Like it's a zero-sum game. And that couldn't be further from the truth. All children, all people deserve our care and our empathy and our love and our compassion and to be seen and to be heard. But I'm highlighting this specifically for young boys and young men because of the rate that this is happening at and the rate that the suicide is happening at and the rate that depression is happening at. Specifically here in Minnesota, and I debated about even saying these numbers because you don't want to be non-sympathetic. You don't want to be and have a lack of empathy towards people and throwing out stats and numbers like these are people, like these are objects, these are things, these are people's babies, these are people's kids, these are people's families members. But the number that stood out to me, and I feel like it bears repeating and it bears representation, is 80% of the suicide rates in Minnesota are males. 80%. And often at the act of violence. So being the father of a young boy and the young men, the young boys that come in here as well, like it felt like it needed to be addressed and addressed in a way where when these kids start to fall behind in school, and they feel like they can't talk to anybody and they feel like they can't speak to anybody because they feel like it's weakness or being vulnerable is not going to be accepted by the other males in the environment, because a lot of times with the youngsters, what they view and what they see as what masculinity is depicted as very strong and very aggressive. And, there's components to that you have to have as not just a person, but specifically as a male that you need to have, but you need to know how to harness it. But when you don't have another male figure guiding you and giving you, some guidance in how to manage that and control that, it can kind of get out of control. And oftentimes with young boys and young men, when they don't feel well, when they need help, it comes off as aggression. And when it comes off as aggression, the rest of the world can back away from you. Even if your act and how you're feeling is come across as it's coming from a place of pain. If you haven't been taught or been guided on how to express that pain in a healthy way, or at least mention it to someone because you feel like you'll be seen as weak, you get further isolation because the behavior makes people back away from you. And the significance of this for us is, why would a gym address something such a massive problem? Because I'm not a counselor and I'm not a therapist and I'm not a clinical psychologist. Obviously the experience and the expertise that is needed to take on something of this magnitude, I am not. And you hope that people, young boys and young men who are going through these things, that they can find this help somewhere. But oftentimes, based off the numbers, they don't find these people, whether that be lack of resource, whether that be lack of knowing, whether it's the feeling I just told you, being vulnerable as a male and it not feeling that it's accepted to do so because you're going to be seen as weak and you don't want to be seen as weak, because once people see weak and see you vulnerable, they really can touch you. And if they can touch you in that way, it can be catastrophic for you. So the significance of us is when young boys and when young males are going through these things, they're most likely going to encounter someone like me, someone in their daily life, a brother, a friend, a counselor, a teacher, in this aspect of what we do. Maybe you encounter me as your coach. And if I can get a hold of you, before one dark day turns into 2 dark days, turns into weeks and years, we can redirect this. And you don't redirect it by coddling. Coddling doesn't help, because you think you need to grab and give people this care with a sense of just, protecting them. But you don't, but in the sense of doing that, you can hurt. You can hurt what a person's potential can be, especially young men and young boys. You can hurt their strength. You can hurt their courage if you coddle them. You want to grab them and let them know, if you can get a hold of it early, that the behavior that they're doing is not going to be accepted. It's not going to be accepted for them as their potential and who they could potentially be. It's not going to be accepted in society, even if you're coming from a place of pain and hurt. It just won't be accepted. And when it won't be accepted, even though your feeling of pain is hurt and it's just, it's coming from a place that's viable and it has a good reason behind it. If it's not coming out the right way, people will back away, and that further isolation will lead to darker days. So if you can encounter us and we can get a hold of you, and I can give you tough love, and I can give you firm love, and not do it in coddling, because again, that's going to hurt you, but I can give it to you in direction and say, hey man, this is how you manage, because I want you to be a monster. And I don't mean a monster as far as violent. I want you to be a monster in what you're able to do, whether that be math, whether that be English, whether that be speech, whether that be here, whether that be sports and athletics. I want you to be a monster, and be a monster that you know how to control, and not one that's out of control. And to do that, when you give young boys and young men direction and say, hey, this behavior is not going to be tolerated. It can't be tolerated. Even though you're hurting, it just can't be. And you give them discipline, and you give them courage, and you give them direction, and you give them encouragement. The smallest amount of encouragement can help take that energy that potentially is bad behavior or seen as bad behavior, can help turn that around and give them hope and give them their strength and give them their courage they didn't have. And if you can hit me before it gets to a really dark point where you actually need a therapist, a qualified counselor, or a clinical psychologist to unpack everything that's going on, if you can hit me first, maybe we can solve these things.